Hey everybody, and welcome to Uncommon Sense America, the show where we discuss the important things and trends happening around the country and why you need to know about them. I'm your host, Dave Long, and in today's episode we're going to be talking about advertising and how it's really starting to get out of control in the United States. So, have you ever been watching a TV show and had to sit through commercial breaks that last, 5 minutes, maybe even more, or, you've been watching, something on cable that, you pay for, obviously, or a streaming service like Hulu or Netflix, and you end up watching, 4 or more ads for every, maybe 5 minutes or so of the actual show or the movie that you're watching. Or, maybe you've been listening to like a paid streaming music service like Pandora or Spotify, and, you hear maybe like a song or two before you're just bombarded with 5 or 6 ads. Or you've been, cruising through your Facebook and, all of a sudden, oh, here comes this political ad. Or you're watching a YouTube video and, an advertiser wants you to answer a freaking survey before you can even watch the video that you have queued up. It's really getting out of control nowadays. That said, America is a consumer society, and, a lot of the products and the services that we buy, people find out about them through this advertising, right? But, a lot of this stuff is, it's stuff that, people don't need. It's just, it's impulse purchases. But, companies realize that, and, they use a whole bunch of psychological tricks to, get us to, buy their goods or their services. So there are quite a few tactics that advertisers use to, get people to buy, products or services from a company. Some of these are based on social acceptance and or status. So examples of this would be, hey ladies, buy this beautiful dress from Ross and, make all your girlfriends jealous. Or, guys, buy the new Ford F-150 or F whatever. And, it has, 8,000 pound towing capacity so you can take your new boat down to the lake. Or, some of the tactics revolve more around, like health or beauty or love. Examples here, eat Chobani Greek yogurt with probiotics to get your digestive system back on track and feel better. Or, for like supplements, for instance, all the supplement companies out there, take the Nitro King or Toned Princess super supplement stack to replace 10 pounds of fat with 10 pounds of muscle in 6 weeks. And some of the tactics revolve more around fear or pain avoidance. So examples here would be any kind of insurance, right? So car insurance, house insurance, life insurance, health insurance, and the deal here is, just think what would happen if you didn't have this insurance to cover you just in case. Or, internet security, protect your identity online. And those types of things. There are probably some other categories as well, but these are really some of the big ones that just come to my mind when I think about this. In the past we had lots of what we would consider nowadays to be old school advertising methods. So you'd have billboards and benches and books and the weekend ads in the newspapers. You'd have radio and TV ads. You'd have people cold calling you. You'd have door-to-door sales people, flyers left on cars, and labels on clothing and purses and accessories and those types of things. This shirt is a perfect example, Abercrombie and Fitch. I don't necessarily care about this brand. I just wanted a lighter colored shirt, but the branding happened to be stuck all over the front of it. So what are you going to do? Nowadays there's new school advertising. This is, largely after the advent of the internet. So you have these cookies that are placed on your computer to, track your clicks and views. And, these cookies help advertisers target you with their tailored ads. Google and YouTube and all of Google's other services do this as well. Facebook, Amazon, plus lots of smaller sites that are trying to serve you ads or sell you a product or a service directly. You also see this quite a bit on, I mentioned this earlier, music streaming services like Pandora and Spotify. You'll be served up ads based on the songs you're listening to and ads that you've already clicked on potentially. Now, in this case, I know that on Pandora, ads can be eliminated by paying for a premium account. I can't say the same for Spotify. I don't use Spotify or have a subscription to them, so I don't know if it works the same. But as a quick aside here, I think this is important because when ads show up on a lot of these websites and other services that I've mentioned, it's important here because in some of these cases you can eliminate the need to see these ads by paying the service, some kind of recurring subscription fee. And so that's how the service makes money. Now, in other cases, the services or the websites or whatever, they make their money based on the advertisers paying them to basically lease out or rent certain parts of the website or certain segments of a show or whatever. And that's how the service is supported monetarily. But, we're going to go through some more examples here, and you're going to see that's not always the case. And I mentioned this earlier as well, movie and TV show streaming services like Netflix and Hulu. Now, it's interesting here because you can pay these subscription movie and TV show streaming services, but you're still going to see ads. And it's the same when you think about like cable television as well. You pay the cable company for the privilege of seeing shows that you wouldn't be able to see on like public access TV, but you're still going to see ads. And you're seeing more and more of these on a year-to-year basis. Now, particularly when it comes to the internet and certain websites, a lot, if not all, of Google's services and Facebook and probably some other websites / social media platforms, they've kind of fallen into the public spotlight specifically for possible violation of privacy laws over the past few years. And there's a lot of questions being raised nowadays over not only the legal implications of these sites and services very closely secretly collecting consumer and customer information, but also just the ethics involved with this. In the old days, it was easy enough for people to just kind of ignore or brush aside ads that weren't pertinent to them or they just weren't interested in. So, if you're walking by a park bench and you see an advertisement for a lawyer, well, who cares? Like, you just look somewhere else and you don't see that particular advertisement anymore. And, in other cases, you'd have, the direct advertisements in the weekend newspapers, and you just flip through the ads for whatever stores you're interested in, and you usually know pretty well where the products were in those ads, based on things that you might need now or in the future, and you could just disregard the rest of it. Today's ads are much more intrusive. They're embedded in the content that you're consuming. They're placed in the middle of the show that you're watching that, like I said before, you've already paid to watch. Really these intrusive ads are becoming longer and they're becoming more frequent as well. And one of the important implications here is that, these advertisements are actually cutting down on the actual content that you're watching. So I'll give you some examples here. So in the 1960s, the average show length for a 1 hour TV slot was 51 minutes. And then the rest of that time was taken up with commercials. By 2016, for a 1 hour showtime slot, the actual content only lasted 42 minutes. The remaining 18 minutes were occupied with commercials. Along the same line, in the early to mid 1960s, a 100-minute film, so that's an hour and 40 minutes, could be broadcast, including commercials, in 120 minutes. So basically, you have an hour and 40-minute movie, and you tack on 20 minutes of commercials to get a 2-hour time block. In 2016, to show that same 100-minute film plus commercials, it would take 2.5 to 3 hours, so 150 to 180 minutes. Because of this, many films are being cut, they're being edited to run in their allotted time frames. And just a question here, have you ever been watching a movie or a TV show you've seen before, and you're pretty aware of what all the scenes are and what's in them, but you watch it on TV and maybe the entire scene or a good part of it's just been removed. It's been cut out just so it can fit in that allotted amount of time, plus to fit in those commercial breaks. So if you're ever wondering, am I crazy? Like, where's this scene or this part of the scene from whatever movie it is I'm watching? Well, that's why.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
So I was trying to find some information from the FCC. That would be the body that regulates commercial breaks and content and things like that of advertisements that air on television in the United States. And I couldn't really find much, but we'll get back to that in a minute or two. So here's some interesting things, some interesting facts about commercial and ad breaks in other countries. So the EU actually limits commercial time to a maximum of 12 minutes per hour. In Germany, public TV stations are funded by a license fee and then 20 minutes of advertisements per day. So 20 minutes of commercials. And none of those are allowed to air after 8 p.m. their time, except Sundays and holidays. Now, private stations are a little bit different. They can show up to 12 minutes of ads per hour, but there has to be at least 20 minutes of actual content between those commercial breaks. Now, in France, they can have a maximum of 12 minutes of ads per hour. With private channels, you can only have one commercial break for any show that lasts an hour or less, or you can have 2 commercial breaks for a show that lasts an hour or more. Public channels can have an average of up to 6 minutes of ads per hour, but none after 8 p.m. So think about that. 6 minutes of ads for a public channel. And the private channels, they can have 12 minutes per hour. That's very different than how it is in the U.S. In Russia, they don't allow any ads for alcohol or medication. So think of all those drug commercials you see popping up on pretty much every channel that someone might watch in the United States. In Norway, no political ads are allowed. So, this is a big thing before any major election. You're going to see candidates for, various offices, either promoting themselves or basically slinging mud at their opponents. And right now in particular, it's just nuts with fall election season coming up. So going back to this point of, finding regulations from the FCC that would regulate, commercial durations and limits and things like that, I wasn't able to find much. I did find one New York Times article from 1982, so their archives, I found this online. So in 1982, the U.S. Justice Department and National Association of Broadcasters agreed to eliminate restraints on the duration of TV commercials. This was the result of an antitrust suit that the Justice Department brought against the National Association of Broadcasters in 1979. And basically they were saying that the National Association of Broadcasters couldn't cooperate. So these different parties within that association, they couldn't cooperate with each other and basically have these agreements to limit the amount of advertising that people are subject to. So think about that for a minute. The Justice Department brought a suit against the National Association of Broadcasters saying, hey, you can't cooperate to limit how much broadcasting is going to be shown on television. Right? Let that sink in. Now, Edward O. Fritz, who is the president of the National Association of Broadcasters, he said, and I quote here, "This is a sad day for the American public. Pure and simple, today's action means that the government does not want television broadcasters to attempt to govern themselves by voluntarily limiting the amount of advertising broadcast into the public's homes." Now, before the National Association of Broadcasters and the U.S. Justice Department basically settled this suit and the National Association of Broadcasters said, okay, we won't cooperate with each other to put in place these very common sense voluntary guidelines to limit the amount of advertisements that people are being subject to. Before that agreement was reached, this broadcast association, they were following their own limitations that they set upon themselves. And some of these guidelines were that only one product could appear per 30-second spot. So think nowadays about, how sometimes you'll see I've seen commercials as short as a second or even less. It's just like a product or something will flash up on the screen so quickly you can't even really see what it's for. Or you'll have these shorter, 5 to 10 second commercial spots. And then, they just roll right through the next one and the next one and the next one. And by the time you get back to your show or movie that you're watching on cable that you've paid for, you've seen, a dozen or more different products from various companies. Anyway, another one of the guidelines that the National Association of Broadcasters had in place before their agreement was reached with the U.S. Justice Department was, that no more than 5 consecutive ads would be shown. So again, think back to what I just said there. Nowadays, you might see it seems like a dozen products per commercial break before you get back to what you really want to watch. Anyway, the third guideline was that no more than 8.5 minutes per hour of ads would be shown, for whatever movie or TV show is currently on. Now, I did find a blurb in that same article stating that the FCC would still maintain a guideline, not a law or a rule, but a guideline that ads be limited to no more than 16 minutes per hour, but that would be raised somewhat during campaign periods. I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds like some pretty, fly by the seat of your pants regulations and guidelines there. Now, I looked at the FCC's website earlier today before I recorded this video, and now it is possible that I wasn't looking in the right place or this regulation could be found somewhere else entirely, but I found no regulations whatsoever concerning the length of TV commercial breaks. Basically, all I saw was a short statement that, networks can basically do whatever they want in response to consumer demands. So basically, in kind of wrapping this video up, I want to, leave you with the question, why can't we adopt some standards like these other countries I mentioned, the EU, Germany, France, in regulating the amount of time that commercials can air on TV, and kind of in addition to that, I think there need to be some additional regulations when it comes to not only the TV advertisement breaks, but also the amount of ads that can be served on platforms like Facebook and other kind of social media platforms and services, but also streaming services like Hulu and Netflix and Pandora and Spotify, basically all of the other ones that are made possible via the internet, well after all of this controversy with FCC happened way back in the late 70s and early 80s. So think about why don't we have those regulations, those rules in place nowadays for the various platforms that people consume their media from, right? So that's going to do it for that episode, and I will talk to you in the next one.